So, something really strange happened in Venezuela's recent July 2025 election. The government announced a winner, sure, but the real story, the one we're going to dig into, is about the votes that just disappeared. I mean, that's the real question here, isn't it? In a national election, how do 2 million votes, 2 million voices, just vanish into thin air? That's the number at the heart of all this, 2 million. We're not talking about a small clerical error. This is a massive figure, absolutely big enough to make people question the entire result. It's what's fueling protests and a lot of international side-eye. Okay, so to really get why that number is such a big deal, you have to understand the incredibly tense situation this election happened in.
You know, for years now, Venezuela has been in a full-blown crisis. Under President Nicolás Maduro, the country's seen its economy crumble, insane hyperinflation, and shortages of basic necessities. So for millions of people, this election wasn't just politics. It felt like a turning point, maybe a last hope for a different future. The stakes were just about as high as they get.
And here's where the math starts to get really fuzzy. Based on all the data and what observers were seeing on the ground, everyone was expecting about 14 million people to show up and vote. But the official number that came back from the Election Council, only 12 million. That 2 million vote gap is the whole mystery.
No surprise here, but as soon as those numbers came out, two totally different stories emerged to explain that gap. You've got the government's version, and then you've got the opposition's.
So on one side, the government's official line is pretty straightforward. They're saying it was just voter apathy, plus some opposition boycotts, and the fact that millions of Venezuelans living overseas couldn't or didn't vote. But on the other side, the opposition is saying something much, much darker, that this wasn't an accident at all, but a calculated plan to suppress votes and manipulate the data.
And the opposition didn't just make a vague claim. They came with receipts, pointing to specific problems all over the country. We're talking widespread reports of polling stations opening hours late, people with valid IDs being turned away with no explanation, and a real climate of fear, especially in rural areas. And maybe most importantly, data analysts started pointing to really weird gaps in the numbers coming out of cities, which just so happened to be the opposition's strongholds.
Let's just take the capital, Caracas, as an example. All day, you saw photos and videos of these massive lines, people waiting for hours. Independent observers on the ground were estimating turnout was as high as 70% in a lot of places. And yet, when the official numbers came out, they said only 50% of people voted. That huge difference, in just one city, could be hundreds of thousands of votes right there.
All of this, as you can imagine, puts Venezuela's entire voting system under a giant microscope. So how does it all actually work, and where are the weak spots?
Venezuela uses an electronic system that's supposed to be secure, but critics point to some huge potential problems. They're worried that data could be tweaked before it even leaves the voting machine. On top of that, the servers that process all the votes, they're controlled by companies with very close ties to the government, and trying to get a truly independent audit of the system is basically impossible.
And look, this isn't just a hypothetical fear. There's a history here, a really big one. Back in 2017, the very company that supplied the voting machines, a company called Smartmatic, came out and publicly accused the government of inflating the results of another vote by at least 1 million. When the system's creator is blowing the whistle, it makes it pretty hard to just take the government's word for it now.
Adding to all these worries was the lack of any real international oversight. The government only let in observers from friendly countries. The big independent watchdogs, like the European Union and the Organization of American States, they weren't there. They said the conditions just weren't in place for a trustworthy election. So you had fewer independent eyes watching what was going on.
And then there's this huge problem of disenfranchisement. It's a fancy word, but it basically means keeping people from voting. You have over 7 million Venezuelans living outside the country, and for most of them, trying to register to vote was a bureaucratic nightmare. The opposition claims this was intentional, a way to silence millions of people who would probably vote against the government.
So when you put it all together, what really happened to those 2 million votes? It pretty much boils down to 3 main theories. So theory 1 is active suppression. People were systematically blocked or scared away from the polls. Theory 2 is straight-up fraud. People voted, but their votes were either changed or just tossed out. And theory 3 is apathy, which is the government story, that millions of people just didn't bother to vote. Most experts think the truth is probably a grim cocktail of the first two.
So why would lower turnout even be a good thing for the government? Well, it's all about how it looks. A smaller total vote makes the opposition's base seem weaker, less fired up. It also means the winner's share of the vote goes up as a percentage, which lets them claim they have this huge, decisive mandate, even if fewer people actually voted for them.
And this whole mess has basically split the international community. On one side, you have countries like the US and those in the EU voicing serious doubts, saying the results just aren't legitimate. And on the other side, you've got government allies like Russia and China who are quick to send their congratulations. It just drives that global wedge over Venezuela even deeper.
At the end of the day, the mystery of the 2 million votes forces us to ask a much, much bigger question. Elections are supposed to be the one clear way that people can speak. But when the numbers don't add up, when the whole process is shrouded in doubt, and when millions of voices might have been silenced, it damages trust not just in one election, but in the whole idea of democracy. And that's a question that Venezuela and the rest of the world will be grappling with for a very long time.